when I say opportunities, I mean like what part of welding do you want to do? Do you want to do just fabrication, or do you want to do like technical aerospace welding? Do you want to do underwater welding? Do you want to do structural welding like an iron worker? From my experience as an apprentice, I worked 512s, I've worked 610s, I've worked 5/8s, I've worked 410s. Hello, welcome to episode 8 of CTQ. CTQ is a segment I do on the show where it's called Cruise to Questions, where I take your guys' questions and I answer them here. Normally I take a couple of your guys' questions that you guys either can email to me at austin@bluecollaredu.com. You can DM me on Instagram at bluecollaredu. You can put them in the YouTube comments down below. You can DM me on TikTok. You can reach out to me in many different ways, LinkedIn. Whatever way is your preferable way of linking up or messaging me, go ahead and do that. You can submit your questions there and I'll take those questions and I put them in my portfolio of questions and then I answer them here for you to learn and others who might have the same or similar questions. With Blue Collar EDU, I'm here to expose, teach, educate you about blue collar career opportunities and things that'll help you get started in a skilled trade. So with that being said, let's hop into question number 1. So question number 1 actually comes from a guy or somebody with the username Leland who actually asked me on Snapchat. Now, Snapchat's also a place you can reach out. Blue Collar EDU is the username. You can add me there, and I actually have quite a few people that'll reach out to me on Snapchat as well. He's asked me, "Hi, can you help me get into welding in the near future?" It's a very loaded and open-ended question because when I think of welding, there's so many different opportunities you can do with welding. Now, like when I say opportunities, I mean like what part of welding do you want to do? Do you want to do just fabrication, or do you want to do like technical aerospace welding? Do you want to do underwater welding? Do you want to do structural welding like an iron worker? Do you want to be a boilermaker where they weld on pipes in big boilers? Do you want to be a pipe fitter where they fit pipes together and weld pipes? Do you want a pipeline weld? What industry of welding do you want to work in? Because there's so many different avenues you can go down with the welding industry. Now, if you want to just do specifically just like welding, when I think of like welding, when I want to get into it, I thought I wanted to be a welder, like that was the career I wanted to choose, but I ended up, when I thought of welding, I thought of like welding things and like building things, putting things together, like fabrication shops. So like, I thought a cool thing of welding would be, I don't know, you like weld and like make a bumper for a truck. And now, sure, those options are out there. You can do that kind of welding. But what I came to find out pretty quickly is that there's not a whole lot of money in the fabrication space. Now, sure, there are companies out there that's what they do, is primarily fabrication for building bumpers or building an add-on for a truck, or they build trailers or whatever. But from my realization, there's not a whole lot of money in that. So I realized, well, you kind of have to do more so things in like structural or boilermaker, or like do pipeline or oil and gas industry somewhere, or underwater welding, and those sorts of industries to make good money with welding. And I didn't know if I wanted to go that far. So I ended up going the lineman route. That's ultimately what I wanted to do, was become a lineman. So that's kind of the first step you'd have to take, is like, well, what industry of welding do you want to work in? And I think honestly, now you can go to a welding school and go get like certain welding certs. I don't know the exact number, but there are a handful of different kind of welding certs you can get between the different types of welding. You have wire feed, you have stick welding, you have the arc welding, you have all these different types of welding that you can do and get certifications in. But ultimately, what I would really do, if I don't know how old you are, either. Ultimately, what I would do is I'd probably find a local shop in your area that does welding of sorts. That they might be a fabrication shop. That's where I started out. And I literally started out by just going to a fabrication shop in the town that I grew up in. And they did metal work of all kinds. They did CNCing, they did technical making parts for manufacturers, and they did big welding jobs, and they provided metal for welding and companies, and like they did a whole bunch of stuff. And I ended up like getting my foot in the door by actually being like a shop guy of just cutting metal for customers is where I started. That's how I got my foot in the door. And then they let me do some welding here and there. And I eventually realized after 4 or 5 months that this wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do, was weld for a living. And so it just wasn't up down my alley. So I decided not to pursue welding as a career full time. But I think if I were to redo it, or if I was thinking that I wanted to do welding as sorts or as part of a career, I'd probably become like an iron worker. So become like a structural welder, where they're messing with, you know, heavy rigging. They're on heights. They're building big buildings, and their welding is a big part of their trade. So something like that would interest me, because that's more so of my like line of work that I enjoy doing. But there's, like I said, there's so many different avenues or opportunities or industries that you can do when it comes to welding. And I think that's kind of the first step that you would have to kind of ask yourself and take is, well, what industry do I want to do? And you can start getting some experience and just get your foot in the door, start learning, you know, at a fabrication shop or a welding shop near you. Maybe they can help you get some welding certifications if they do that kind of stuff. And, you know, maybe you want to enroll in a welding school. I know there's lots of welding schools out there that'll help you get certifications or help you find jobs in the welding industry. Or do you want to just like what do you want to do as a welder in a career? If you want to just like make a buttload of money, you know, you could do the pipeline gig where those guys make a lot of money. They work long hours and they work in the middle of nowhere. You know, you could become an underwater welder where those guys make a lot of money, but it's a very niche, competitive, small trade to get into. You can do structural. You can find a union like the Boilermakers or Pipe Fitters Union or Ironworkers Union, where you could complete, you know, get one of those apprenticeships, and welding is part of those trades. And you could become a journeyman Boilermaker, a journeyman Ironworker, or journeyman Pipe Fitter. And inside that trade, you're going to learn welding, and welding is going to be part of that trade. You're going to get certifications in those trades, and you can just look for apprenticeships, union apprenticeships for those specific trades. I have on the YouTube channel itself, if you go to the playlist, you can actually find, I have Boilermakers. I have a playlist there to learn more about the Boilermakers. I have some podcasts, welders and iron workers, to learn more about those trades and what they have to offer and how to get started, and kind of tips and tricks and pieces of advice from professionals in those trades, so where you can learn a lot more about welding, ironworker, and things of those natures. That's kind of what I would suggest for you to do, is maybe just get your foot in the door somewhere locally and work at a fab shop or something like that, and see if welding is something you want to do on a day-to-day basis long term. I know my brothers, they thought they wanted to be welders as well, and they worked at literally a shipyard basically, where they built ships, and literally all they did was just weld all day long, just big beads. And that's what they did. And they didn't have any prior experience or any welding certifications or anything like that. All they'd have to do was a welding test, and then based off their welding test, they were kind of placed in positions to where either they can learn more or in a position where they can just start welding. But they ultimately, after I don't know how long, maybe a couple months, they figured that welding in those sorts of conditions was not the kind of welding that they expected, and the money, it wasn't that great to them either. But either way, they got the experience, and they realized that that's not something that they want to do for a full-time career for 20, 30, 40 years. But also, you know, if you end up doing welding and you're good at it and you enjoy doing it, maybe you do it for 5, 10 years and you can become a welding instructor, educator, or a welding inspector. There's avenues like that, you know, down the road as a career welder that you could eventually start doing. I know a guy, Nate Bowman, the weld scientist on Instagram. He's a great resource, that he's very passionate about the welding industry. And he's one of the guys that if I want to reach out to somebody about the welding world, he's the first guy I'm going to reach out to. So think his Instagram username is the Weld Scientist. And he's a great resource. Absolutely one of probably the best guy I would reach out to if I had more questions specifically about like how to get started or where to get started, the tips and tricks or piece of advice or steps to take to get started in the welding industry. That's my advice to you as far as when you say, can you help me get into welding in the near future? That's kind of what I would tell you I'm not a professional welder, but I have like very minimal experience in the welding industry so far. But as far as just having industry advice from my knowledge, that's what I would tell you to do. All right, so let's hop into question number 2. Question number 2 comes a guy named Braden who emailed me saying, just had a few questions and was wondering if you could answer them for me. I'm 17 years old. My best friend and I want to be linemen and rent out a house together. Was curious how much you work as an apprentice and or as a journeyman. Lineman wouldn't be my only way of income. My buddy and I would like to work at the same company as well. Do you have to travel a lot as an apprentice, or would you just stay in the state where you're CDL licensed? Curious on what you think about my situation and my questions. How much do you work as an apprentice and or as a journeyman? This kind of all depends on if you're going the utility route or the outside lineman route is going to answer your question on how much you can work and do you travel a lot as an apprentice. So on the outside construction, if you become apprentice on the outside construction aspect, so you're not working for the utility, when I mean the utility, I mean like the utility, the company that you're paying your power bill to, who provides the power. Then you'll have the contractor side, which the contractors work for the utility. They do the work on the utility's property. Those are two different entities that you could work for or get in as an apprentice. Now, on the contractor outside, you could be working 410s, 5/8s, 512s, 510s, 612s, 610s, 712s. The schedule definitely varies. You can anywhere from 4 days a week to 7 days a week. It all depends on the job you're doing, the location of where you're at, who you're working for. There's a lot of different variables you have to include when it comes to how much you can work. And this also means, like, do you travel a lot? On outside construction, you can travel a lot. You can be placed away from home quite a few times for long periods of times. The answer to this is yes and no, because if you end up getting on with a utility, then you could be working 5/8s or 410s or whatever their schedule is. Plus overtime, of course, there could be call outs for power outages or a storm rolls in and you work those type of things. But for the most part, there's a lot of utilities, they just work 5 days a week is normal. I'm not saying they all do, but that's pretty normal. A Monday through Friday gig for utility. Sometimes, Saturdays and Sundays scheduled work or outages or things like that, of course. But it's hard for me to tell you exactly like how much you work. I can only tell you from my experience as an apprentice. I worked 512s, I've worked 610s, I've worked 5/8s, I've worked 410s, I've worked 710s, I've worked almost every different schedule that you could work. I did work as an apprentice. And right now, as a journeyman, I'm working technically 410s plus we work Fridays. So we usually work 510s Monday through Friday, 5 10-hour days. And that's normally the schedule that we work. That's on average is what most of the guys work around here. But you also mentioned here, you and your best friend want to be linemen and rent a house together. And then you also kind of mentioned there, you guys would like to work at the same company as well. That to me sounds like the best option would be for you to try to get on with the utility, but it's going to be hard to get on with your friend. It's not impossible. I've seen it happen. I actually had a couple cousins who ended up getting on with the same company and they worked with each other, around each other for the first several months, and then they got transferred to different crews, different jobs, and then they split ways. If you're looking to want to be with your friend the whole time, I'm just gonna say that's not gonna be. That's there's a good chance that's not going to happen. So just accept that fact right now if you really want to get into it, but you're only going to do it to be with your friend. Maybe the trade isn't for you because that's the very low likely of that happening. Now, you guys could get in around the same time. You guys could get in around the same apprenticeship, and maybe you guys end up working with each other and going through it with each other. That is possible, and I've seen that happen. But, you know, I would not rely on the fact of doing it with your best friend. It's a very competitive trade. You might rank better than your friend, or your friend might rank better than you. Your friend might be a better candidate, applicant than you, or vice versa. So it's hard to really be defined that you will be able to get in with your best friend in an apprenticeship. Just not very likely. So take that as you will. You also asked, would you, the travel aspect about, you know, staying in the same state where you got your CDL. Man, that's the other thing too. It's all about where you apply. You know what I mean? I don't know state or what area you are in, but if you, I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, let's say you live in Texas. You could apply at SWOLCAT, the Southwest Line Contractors Apprenticeship, and through local IBW Local 66. And, you know, they always need apprentices. And there's a good chance that maybe you stay in Texas where you're at. I mean, if you're under 21 years old, your CDL is only good in the state you got it in anyway. So technically you'd have to transfer it to a different state for it to be legal to drive in the other state because you're not 21 yet. So that's going to be an issue you will and can run into. I ran into that when I got in the apprenticeship. I was only 20, so I had to transfer my license to a different state so I could legally drive in that state. So those are some things you're going to have to consider. You know, I would say at 17 years old, you and your friend, you know, I would say it'd be difficult to get in with your friend if that's what you're relying on. I do not rely on that to think that you're going to be able to get into an apprenticeship with your friend and you live in the same house and do the apprenticeship together. There's a very small percentage, like 0.01% chance that that'll happen. It's not impossible, but I'm just saying there's a low chance. And yes, there is travel. You can work a lot. Really does. There's a lot of variables. Contractor or utility. Could be working a lot as a contractor. You could be working a lot as a utility hand or vice versa. And there's a lot of variables. So I couldn't give you a definite answer of yes, no, yes, you're going to work 5/8, you're only going to work 40 hours a week, you're only going to make this much money a year, you're only going to travel this much. There's just too much, there's too many variables. Take that information as you will, take those things into consideration for you, yourself, your buddy. I personally think do not rely on getting into an apprenticeship with your buddy and that's going to be your way in and you're going to do it with him, because if that's what you want to do, then maybe the lineman trade is not for you. I would say just do it with yourself. And if your buddy gets in with you, you guys get in with each other, that's awesome. But just don't rely on the fact that you're going to be able to do it with him. Hopefully you guys can learn from those questions and my answers. These are all just, you know, speculation and knowledge and what I have from my experience so far in the trades and as a lineman and working on welding a little bit and just my almost 10 years of experience really working in the blue collar world. If you guys have questions, like I said, you email them to me at austin@bluecollaredu.com or email me, you know, or ask me on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube comments. There's a lot of different ways you can ask me on Snapchat. And I'll take your questions and then I'll answer them here. You know, I'll do the segment once a week or so I can help you guys. With Blue Collar EDU, I'm here to expose, teach, and educate you about blue collar career opportunities, things that'll help you get started in a skilled trade. So with that being said, I'll catch you on episode 9 of CTQ.